When we looked at the demonstration project, we knew that solar was coming and that residential solar was going to be the first market that we were going to see.
The technology is moving fast. We have to have that discussion. We need to face it. And if we don't embrace it and bring it to the members, they're going to get it from somebody else.
We wanted to show our members that we are the ones to come to with their questions. How much does it cost? What it takes to put in? What they can expect to get out of it.
We always like to talk about technology changing, but technology changing causes other things to change, and we're seeing that in the commodity market.
What's the co-op going to look like in 20 years? Are we still going to have central station service, or will everybody go back to having solar and a battery or wind, much like we did years ago?
From a generation standpoint, on down to the distribution cooperative, with solar, wind resources, all them are driving the markets and the activities we've got going on out there. So we have a lot of challenges ahead of us right now.
Why are we seeing the challenges we have is because of the price of natural gas. Why is the price of natural gas so low for so long? It's because of the change in technology in oil.
Reliable, affordable electric service to our members today is the biggest challenge, as it was back in the 40s and 50s when we had to build the facilities. Now we're seeing a change in direction from power supply. All of it still revolves around providing quality service to our members.
Good afternoon. The Markets and Membership panel will feature 4 Basin Electric staff members as panelists. Dave Rotz, Senior Vice President of Asset Management, Planning and Rates. Becky Kern, Director of Utility Planning. Bill Weigel, Director of Short-Term Trading and Financial Analytics. And Tom Christensen, Senior Vice President of Transmission Engineering and Construction. So each panelist will do a brief presentation before we move into the question and answer portion of the panel. Again, there are microphones on the floor to the front of the room. So if you can't get to them, please raise your hand. We'll have somebody come to you. For all my fellow managers, this is where we always want Dave Rotz with a spotlight in his face so we can ask him questions. So please think of something. We'll begin with Dave Rotz. We'll follow Becky Kern, Val Weigel, and conclude the presentations with Tom Christensen. So please start us out, Dave.
Thank you, Tom, and good afternoon to everyone in attendance today. 2018 has been another good year for Basin member sales levels. Between the summer of 2017 and the summer of 2018, the Basin Electric membership experienced over 100 megawatts of peak load growth. As a result of this growth, Basin Electric hit new all-time high winter and summer season member peak demand sales levels in January and July of 2018. However, all members did not experience growth over this period of time, as they are seeing challenges in maintaining and getting new loads. Nonetheless, we are expecting overall member electric growth to continue at a rate of about 1 to 1.5% per year into the future. It's interesting to look and see what's happened to Basin Electric's average member rate for electricity. Over the last 10 years, you can see Basin Electric's rate has increased. Some of the reasons are resource fixed cost increases, resource location additions to maintain system reliability, even though we could have bought the power at a lower cost in the market, our transmission service policy, where Basin Electric became responsible for the high voltage FERC transmission tariff wheeling costs to support power deliveries to you. Commodity price reductions, which results in lower surplus sales revenue in the near term, but long term should provide a benefit to the membership, and reduced net DGC benefits. While over the same time period, the electric market price of electricity has decreased. The market price represented on this graph would be comparable to a firm product from Basin Electric. It includes the cost of buying energy from the market, securing capacity to meet the load plus reserve obligations in the power pools, the needed transmission and ancillary service costs, and the administrative fees to schedule, dispatch, and account for all of the transactions. A major driver in the decreased electric market is the reduced natural gas prices as a result of the availability of new natural gas sources. The availability of this low-cost gas is largely attributable to fracking techniques which started to be used in the 2008 to 2010 time period, which made it more economical to extract gas and oil from the shale formations in many parts of the country. You can see that's where the chart or the market price really starts to drop. Another factor driving market prices down is the amount of wind generation that has been added to the system over the last 4 to 5 years. With the availability of abundant, low-cost natural gas, consumer self-generation options and market competition are presenting load growth challenges. Some of the specific areas where we're seeing load growth challenges are in the ethanol industry, where industry can utilize on-site, low-cost natural gas in their processes to reduce electric consumption and increase their revenue streams. Coal mine electric usage. Coal-fired generation is competing head-to-head with other low-cost sources of energy in the market. Due to the low market prices, many coal plant generation levels are decreasing, and as a result, coal mines do not need to use as much electric energy. Gas processing plants in the Basin, where they can also use on-site, low-cost natural gas to reduce electric consumption. And in the residential sector, where consumers have access to low-cost gas for heating, where increased energy efficiencies of new construction processes and appliances reduce electric usage per household, and with an end consumer desire to utilize low-cost renewable generation alternatives to offset utility power purchases. Through ongoing discussions with the membership, Basin Electric is continuing our efforts to support your energy marketing programs with a number of special rates. We are maintaining the long-standing electric heat rate. We have recently implemented and are maintaining the demand period waiver program, which allows the membership access to electric rates for shoulder hour and off-peak periods without an associated demand charge. And new for 2019 is the load incentive rate to provide a discounted demand rate through 2022 to encourage new large loads to develop in our member service territories. Now I'd like to turn over the podium to Becky Kern and Val Weigel from my department to talk about what other utilities are doing around us, what they're seeing for load growth, and to talk about what our future power supply plans are to reliably meet your power needs at the lowest possible cost.
Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Here we go. In order to reliably plan for the future, we must first understand what is going on around us. Basin Electric and you, our members, operate in 4 distinct power supply regions. Each of these areas have their own challenges and opportunities. Each of these areas are getting impacted differently by load growth, renewable resource development, and resource retirements. Basin Electric is impacted the most within the Southwest Power Pool region, as more than 3/4 of our member power obligations reside in this area. Generally speaking, within all 4 planning areas, overall load growth of other utilities within those regions has been flat to slightly declining. This is mainly due to energy conservation and efficiency and behind-the-meter generation. Renewable development has been phenomenal over the last number of years. In the SPP and MISO regional transmission organizations, there's been a combined increase of more than 11 gigawatts of additional wind development in the last 3 years. There's also been significant amount of wind development in the Colorado and Wyoming areas as well. We are expecting significant additional renewable development to occur over the next couple of years as the production tax credit comes to an end. While we do not know how much additional renewable resource additions will occur, the thing we do know is that it will have further impacts on market prices, local congestion issues, and require transmission system expansion. Some utilities are seeing the need to retire generating assets in order to allow for the inclusion of additional low-cost renewable generation into their generation mix because they are not experiencing significant load growth. Utilities are also seeing significantly more competition against those generating assets that make it hard for them to compete in the market. Over the last 3 to 4 years, SPP and MISO have seen close to 17 gigawatts of baseload resource retirements. As we go forward, I would expect to see more baseload resource retirements. If market prices remain low, it will become harder and harder for those older assets to economically compete in those markets. I'd also expect to see more natural gas generation units brought online to backstop the renewable resource additions as gas prices are forecasted to remain below $4 a decatherm for the foreseeable future.
Becky discussed some major changes in the world around us. These major changes are primary drivers for market prices. At a high level, market prices are derived by the market solving to serve the load at the lowest cost. On a daily basis, all generation is offered into the market at a cost. This creates a generation stack in the market that stacks all available generation in megawatts from the lowest cost to the highest cost. You can see wind and other renewables are at the bottom of this stack, and very expensive diesel units are at the top. At the same time the available generation is submitted, all market participants are also informing the market of the load they will need to serve. Once the market has this information, the market solves for the lowest cost generation mix and transmission availability to serve that level of load. So, as more wind is added into the market, more low-cost generation is added to the bottom of the generation stack. This changes the intersection point of the load and the generation. This intersection point defines the marginal unit, which sets the market price. Coal and gas units generally are the units which set the marginal price in the market. Given a lower gas price environment, this produces lower power prices. Thus, the addition of renewable resources and lower natural gas prices have worked together to lower the market power price. As a result of this lowering of price, there is continual price pressure on generation in the market, especially on units that are running around the clock, like our coal-fired units. The good news is there are things we can do to minimize some of the impact of the low market prices. Earlier this year, Paul formed the Process Assessment Team. The Process Assessment Team is a group of cross-functional individuals that spend time with staff on all ends of the business to review the current structures and processes to gain efficiencies, save money, and work smarter. One of the initiatives of the Process Assessment Team was focused on the plants. The group identified major areas to address cost containment and the prudent spending of dollars. Now, other staff members from across the cooperative have been pulled in to help implement and carry out these initiatives. Given change in the industry, metrics we have used in the past to set goals and measure success are changing. We are working to develop new metrics to gauge how well individual generators are performing against the short-term market, how well individual generators will remain viable in the long-term market, and to ultimately set cost reduction goals, which will impact the member rate. All three of these measures work together. In an ongoing process, the Asset Management, Resource Planning, and Rates Group continues to work together with the plants to optimize our generation fleet in the market. The takeaway from all of this is that we want to try our best to ensure Basin resources can remain competitive and viable in the markets. I've talked a lot about the SPP market, but it is important to note that we participate in 4 distinct energy markets. SPP and MISO are both regional transmission organizations, while Montana and the West are non-RTO markets. However, whether we're talking about resources in the East or resources in the West, we face similar challenges in all markets.
With the challenge we are seeing with the low power prices impacting our generating assets, come opportunities to secure future power supply at below the cost of new resources. Power supply comes in two forms, capacity and energy. Energy will be discussed more in a moment, but as it relates to capacity, utilities are required to have adequate resource capability to meet peak load obligations plus a reserve margin. These are resources that are capable of being dispatched in the event they are needed to hold the system together. This is what keeps the lights on. Due to our members' load growth and the region having significant surpluses, we've been issuing power supply requests for proposal for the last number of years to try to buy capacity below the cost of new resources. Through the power supply request for proposals, we have been able to purchase close to 800 megawatts of capacity to help meet our member power requirements, which in turn pushes out our need for building new resources and ultimately creating what we call a cliff event to more economically align the new resource timing with the market and our members' load growth. Previously, we thought this cliff event would be best suited for 2023. Now, we believe we may be able to push this out to the 2026 to 28 time period. At this time, we are working on solutions that support this strategy, yet we continue to monitor market conditions, load growth, and regional reserve margins that will directly impact the viability and economics of this strategy. You heard Paul earlier today talk about our reliance on coal generation and how it has changed. We've gone from a capacity or generation capability portfolio made up of 85% 20 years ago to 45% today, but it is expected to drop even further as the portion of the AVS number 2 lease expires in a couple of years. This large change in our generation capability portfolio has not happened because of coal plant retirements like other utilities, but because of the significant load growth we've experienced, we have been able to add other fuel types into the mix. Natural gas and wind each make up about 20% today, and wind is expected to increase to just over 25% of our generation capability portfolio when the next 2 wind projects come online in a couple of years.
Like Becky said, we will always meet capacity requirements ahead of time in the markets we participate in, but we don't have to generate all of our own energy to serve our own load. The market gives us an opportunity to buy energy on a daily basis. We are in the process of establishing risk-measured long or short energy positions by market. In terms of a short energy position, this means intentionally leaving a part of our position open to have the opportunity to take advantage of low market energy prices. Over the next few years in the SPP market, given increases in load and decreases in generation and purchases, our exposure to the energy market is naturally opening up. While we are evaluating opportunities to take advantage of low-cost energy purchases in the market and close some of the forward open energy gap, we are also working towards allowing for a portion of our energy to be purchased at low market prices. Again, we will have a different approach to a short or long energy position in each market, given market characteristics, which drive the prices, and the basin load and types of generation in each of those markets. At the end of the day, our goal in all of this is to provide you, the membership, the most competitive wholesale energy rates that we can. Next, Tom Christensen will come forward and share an update from our transmission, engineering, and construction department.
Thanks, Dave, Becky, and Val. Transmission, engineering, and construction continues to support the various other departments of Basin Electric. Specifically, in the case of determining whether to buy versus build, we support resource planning in their decision process. And to do that, we need to provide accurate, cost estimates for the generation build options, and that includes accurate estimates for the electric transmission and any associated pipeline costs. Engineering and construction also supports operations at our existing facilities, both generation and transmission. Basin Electric continues an excellent operating record for our power plants, and our plant personnel deserve to be commended. However, our plants need to continue operating efficiently while meeting environmental requirements, and we need to support our plants' operations accordingly. Basin Electric operates over 3,600 megawatts of existing coal plant facilities, and engineering is involved in projects that support these fleets. Two recent major projects include the Leland Old Station Bottom Ash Dewatering Project and the Laramie River Station NOx controls. John Jacobs provided details about these projects earlier, and I'm happy to note that both projects are estimated to be complete on time, under budget, with an excellent safety record. Basin Electric's existing gas-fired generation of over 1,100 megawatts is newer than our coal fleet, but also requires engineering support. An example here is the new steam turbine controls at Deer Creek Station. Basin Electric's transmission operations also has an excellent operating record thanks to a very capable and dedicated transmission system maintenance staff. Due to aging infrastructure at a number of our substations, we're embarking on a multi-year plan with TSM to coordinate refurbishments. One example is the recent work at the Leland Old Station 230 kV yard. Since Basin Electric's beginnings, relationships have been fundamental to our success in providing you, our members, with low-cost, reliable power. In 2015, we gained a new partner, and thus a new relationship, when we joined SPP on the east. Although the structure has changed, we still work closely with WAPA personnel, both east and west. WAPA is a decades-old partner, and we value that relationship immensely. And with our SPP membership, we've added to that partnership. Together with WAPA and SPP, we have a strong foundation from which we can serve our members. One change as a result of the SPP membership pertains to the transmission planning process, which now needs final approval from SPP. But our internal transmission studies are still required to provide detailed project proposals and to provide input and feedback to SPP. Additionally, the method by which we recover transmission costs has changed, as that is now governed by a FERC process. In recent history, the significant load growth in the Bakken area of western North Dakota and eastern Montana presented challenges to serve member load. Just 10 years ago, that system was served by a 115 kV system. As of November 17, the Judson to Nesset 345 kV line was completed as the latest major addition in that build-out. Now that system provides a solid base for the future. It is noteworthy that just last winter, this system served member load of over 1,200 megawatts. One constant element in the world of transmission is NERC requirements. Currently, there are 67 applicable NERC standards with multiple requirements in each, and it's worthy to note these are requirements, they're not just guidelines. The last update I'd like to share with you is in regard to possible changes on our West Side operations. As was shared with you last year, we, along with our neighbors on the west, have been exploring the prospect of bringing our West Side facilities into SPP as well. And this group we called the Mountain West Transmission Group. A key component of the Mountain West proposal is to integrate and optimize the DC ties between Mountain West and SPP East into a single market solution, both east and west. We've been working on this for more than 4 years. However, with the withdrawal of 2 utilities earlier this year, the entities in Mountain West have paused efforts for now. There are many moving parts on the west, but SPP has stepped up to the plate and will be providing reliability coordination services on the west. And we noted earlier that there's NERC requirements. This is one of them. You must have a reliability coordinator. Our departments reduced staffing levels, along with the prioritization of expenditures, will present challenges. But we are confident with our excellent staff, and we will get the job done. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tom Boyko. for the panel discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now we'll begin the question and answer period. I've got a few questions I'll start out on, but if anybody has questions, again, there's microphones on either side of the room. First for Dave, how do we compete in the future against distributed generation with the projected low gas rates? In East River, we have some ethanol plants that they have put in some self-generation, and they point to low gas rates and other opportunities they have. And how do we compete with that going forward?
I think one of the, and we've had discussions with the membership dealing with the ethanol plants, sugar beet plants, just a number of different firms that are looking at how to improve their bottom line. And I think the first line of defense, the best thing we can do is be out talking to the end consumer. We need to build that relationship. We need to understand what their economics are. I think we do have a number of special rates that could be brought to bear in those discussions. Even if we don't have special rates, we have a forum with the Class A manager from each district where we can talk about, do we need to do other things? I think the other thing, as I've looked at and participated in discussions with the membership in dealing with this, it's to also point out, that there are other costs that the utilities are going to incur even if they do put in self-generation. We need to explain to them in terms that they can understand, that we still have transmission, distribution systems that are there to support their systems when that generation goes down. And, there's costs associated with that. And I think it's that collaborative discussion with the end consumer that's really the key. Now, that doesn't mean that we'll always be successful in those discussions, but at least we are working with the end consumer. We're ultimately looking for what's the best alternative for that end consumer, and I think that brings a level of respect and a joint partnership with those end consumers.
I appreciate that, and I also want to thank Dave. He has participated in those negotiations as we go through that, and that's been invaluable, so appreciate that. To Tom, what will Basin's transmission system look like in 5 to 10 years, and how are we going to be positioned in the RTOs? Are we optimized, or do we have more work to do?
So it's always dangerous to talk about what the future is going to look like. But maybe before we start with what that future might be and what those changes might be, maybe think about some of the things that probably won't change. And I can't imagine the partnerships that we have in the interconnected operations with WAPA, with our members. I don't see that changing. So we have a very solid system out there with the partnership with Western. Again, it's not just Basin's transmission system. It's that partnership with Western and members, and in some cases investor owns. Maybe to think about what changes might be coming down the road. What are the driving forces? I suppose increases in load is going to drive some changes. Increases in generation, new generation, specifically renewables. And I suppose some emerging technologies. On the load side, we've got a pretty robust system. Yes, if there's significant load growth in certain areas, we can have some issues, but we've usually got a pretty good system to tie back to. So not too concerned about that, and I don't think that's would drive major changes. Although, I mean, one of the recent things that happened was the Basin build out. We spent significant dollars, and we had a peak load of 1,200 megawatts last winter. But on the generation interconnection side, that's probably more of a game changer. Right now on SPP, SPP is a peak load of about 50,000 megawatts. But just in the generation interconnection queue right now, there's 60,000 megawatts of new wind, 20,000 megawatts of new solar, and I think it's around 3,000 megawatts of battery. So, you know, those numbers suggest that there's going to be some changes coming. Not all of that's going to get built, but if only a fraction of it gets built, it's going to have some impacts. One of the causes, or one of the outcomes, I suppose, would be some retirements of existing plants. And so what you probably see from that is some increased congestion. I think that would probably be inevitable. Now, I guess one point I'd want to make on the congestion, that tends to be an economic issue. We have a transmission operator, which is, you know, WAP on the east. It's SPP is the reliability coordinator. There's real-time reliability analysis going on, whether it's steady state, voltage stability, transient stability. All of those things happen. We'll stay in a reliable state, but there's going to be monetary impacts because of that congestion. Because of that congestion, there's a process by which you identify economic transmission projects. And I would expect, in the case of increased renewables, some plant retirements, there'd be some increased economic projects that get built within SPP. Suspect those would probably be 345 kV, at least that voltage level. Those would be regionally shared. And that would tend to solve most of that congestion. Again, it has to be an economic decision. You have to, you know, if it's a little bit of congestion, you're not going to build a transmission project. If it's a lot, there'll be something that gets built. So increased congestion due to renewables, probably some new transmission down the line. And all of that takes time to get that transmission built.
Thank you. For Dave, you know, what's your vision on going forward with regard to Basin Electric's generation portfolio, and then how do you make those decisions? Do you look at the renewable portfolio you want, the capacity needs, economic decisions? How do you make those decisions as we go forward?
I think, you know, first off, I'd point to one of those slides that Becky had and Paul used this morning on the changing makeup of our portfolio. As time has gone on, coal is a smaller portion of our portfolio. Through that process, Becky's group goes through and they do the load forecasts, they do the resource planning, they do RFPs. We look at what those alternatives are. But I think probably the biggest challenge we've got right now is an upcoming discussion that we're going to have with the Basin Board. And it's how much do we want to rely on the energy market to meet our long-term power supply. Today, it's very advantageous to go to the market, especially off-peak. Sometimes they'll even pay to serve load, you know, so we have a negative price. But if you go out 5 years or 10 years into the future, as more resources get retired in the area, you know, is that situation going to continue? And so as we are looking at what's the right makeup of Basin's portfolio, I think it's going to become a question on when do we think it's right to try to tie down some of this low-cost energy? Can we tie that down for 5 years or 30 years? You know, so there's a very iterative process. We're going to have those discussions with the board. We'll have more of those ongoing discussions with you as the membership. And I think that's really the biggest challenge, Tom. But I do believe our portfolio is going to become more diversified, just like it has historically.
Thank you. So obviously the members' load play into what you're planning on in the future. So what can we do to help you succeed in the future and getting the lowest cost power, making sure we're optimizing our resources in SPP? So what can the members do to help the Basin?
Well, I'll take a first shot at it. And I kind of go back to, you know, some of the, on the transmission side is kind of where I'm coming from on this. In the Bakken build out, and there's been other areas too with other members, but I think in that whole transmission planning process, it's been that communication with the members, and you know, it's been tough communications at times, communicating our needs, being able to understand what the members' needs are, but it's that communication that in the end, I think, and especially with respect to the Bakken, we ended up with a system that's serving the load. We've looked back to think a little bit about what we could have done different, should have done different. At the end of the day, the physics of the system or the actual system that we came up with is pretty good, and we're not really sure what we could have done better on that. And it was all due to the communications aspect. So, I mean, that's just a specific instance of that communication process. But as we go forward, it seems like that open communication, it takes time. It's difficult at times, but it needs to happen, and that's how, I guess, both from a member helping basins and Basin helping the membership, that we can come up with better solutions as we go forward.
I think I could piggyback on top of that, and I think the key part that Tom said was the open communications. From the power supply planning, from the rate setting process that Becky and Val work on, and their staffs work on, that communication is so important. We need, Basin tries to forecast the load forecast. We are not the experts of what's going on in your system. We need your expertise and your vision on what's happening in your area so that we can get it built into our processes through this load forecast. That's such a key document because it goes into all aspects of the business. It goes into the resource planning, it goes into the transmission planning, it goes into the rate setting process. And so that communications on what's going on, what do you see as the future? From Val's perspective, from the marketing folks, if you guys are seeing things that are changing, and we're very appreciative when we get an email or a call to say, hey Basin, did you know that one of the Poet ethanol plants is going down for a 2-week period of time or some period of time? That makes it easier for staff to do a better job of forecasting loads on a short-term basis. We're just not aware of that level of detail sitting in Bismarck. And so that communications back and forth with what's going on in your system, what are you guys seeing, really helps Basin make better decisions on power supply, both on a very short-term and a long-term basis. I'd also like to say communications is essential in the rate component aspect as well. Not only in the implementation of those rates, we're having discussions with multiple members, as an example, with the ethanol industry on how do we implement a standby rate. And I think it's very important that from a co-op family that we have the same story back to the end consumer. You know, it's not always just the single end consumer, it's an organization. And so that communications is very helpful. Obviously, Basin doesn't serve the end consumer. We'll never have a discussion with the end consumer unless they specifically contact us on something. You know, they're your consumers. And so we can help facilitate some of that discussion, but communications is key at all levels. Even if you think it's not important, it really is.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that we run into a lot is people look at the market and they see this energy price, and then they try to compare that against the product we're providing. And you're providing a lot more than just the energy price, and you know, it takes a team of experts like you to bring that power to the end consumer. Can you talk about it's more than just energy, what the other products are that you have to supply to provide that end consumer with reliable power? And you know, when they look at the mark and they just see $25 or $20 energy, that's just a part of the story. There's a lot more to it.
Well, in addition to the energy, you do see the low energy prices that are printed in the market. Anytime you can see prices anywhere from, like Dave said, negative pricing at times, and then sometimes even in the real-time market, you see prices well over $300 at times. But that's just the energy component. The other components to the prices too are the capacity that our resources provide and the transmission as well. So in addition to that energy price, there's other builders on top of that that come up to that full member rate that we share with you.
Okay.
One thing that I want to point out, that when Val's group and Ken's group, as far as the asset management, when they do the daily scheduling, you know, they're scheduling load and they're also bidding in resources. And so from Basin's perspective, we have somewhat of a natural hedge. You know, if the power markets were $50 or if they're $10, we're buying the energy to serve the load at those prices, but we're also getting the revenue from our resources. And so we're somewhat protected from real volatile energy prices because we have those generation assets. And so I know on an hour-by-hour basis, you see tremendous volatility, and we've got staff that bid in gas-fired generation when prices spike up to $300. Now you don't see that. That's not an average price for the day, but there is a lot of volatility out there in that energy market. One of the other things, Becky, could you talk about some of the capacity and the transmission that also comes with the power supply?
Yep. Yes, I can. And I think Dave even talked about this a little bit earlier during his presentation. With the capacity, you know, as I even mentioned, you have to have adequate resources to meet resource capability or the resource adequacy requirement and have that peak load obligation as well as a reserve margin to keep those lights on. With the transmission, you know, you have to pay for the poles and the wires that are existing there. So, you know, all the users of the system have to pay for that. There's additional ancillary services for scheduling and dispatch, reactive control, regulation. All of those pieces have to be paid for by all the users of the system as well.
Okay, thank you. And you also have DC ties that you bring in. You talk about assets that help you be competitive and flexible. Can you talk about the benefit they bring to the table?
Sure. There's different benefits in terms of energy and capacity and transmission benefits from the DC ties. I can talk about the benefits in terms of energy. There's a few primary benefits that we see. On the west side of the market, we have a significant amount of surplus power from our generation in excess of the load that we need to serve. So those DC ties give us an option to move the power from the west interconnect over into the eastern interconnect. Another opportunity that we do get from the DC ties is we do have time frames when our units trip or are on outage on the west side of the market. And those ties give us an option to bring in the low-cost power from the east. Finally, another thing the ties give us optionality on is our position on our load that we serve up in Montana. We don't have any resources up in that area, any generation. We do have long-term purchases. But the ties help us to balance the load in that market on a daily basis. Those are some of the primary energy-related components and benefits that we get from the ties.
And I can add some on the capacity benefit, and this allows us more on a long-term basis. If we have the transmission rights in those DC ties, we can utilize some of that excess capacity that we have on our western system located at our generating facilities there and move that capacity to the eastern system, which allows us to avoid the need to build additional resources or go out and procure additional power supply. You know, we can utilize the existing assets that are already sitting there if we have those transmission rights to utilize that in the DC tie.
Okay, thank you. To Becky, you showed earlier that we have about 800 megawatts in purchase power agreements. What do you see out there in the future? Is there a lot of ability to purchase power going forward, or is that starting to dry up, or what are your predictions there?
There are still some that exist. We've been actively issuing requests for proposals here for the last number of years, and so we've tried to secure some of that power supply here today. There are right now excess reserve margins within SPP and MISO. I think the MISO reserve margin will probably be diminished a lot sooner than the SPP one will be. SPP's got capacity, excess capacity for quite a long time, at least right now, as long as the resources continue to operate. The one thing is, though, they have to be deliverable to your load. And so when you look at the resources that are within our area, if we've already contracted for a lot of that capacity to come to us, there may be less in the future than there is today. We are looking at various options to provide additional maybe DC tie transfer capability, reaching out to additional entities, extending contracts that we've done before, always trying to find new opportunities though for that.
Good, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody? Doug? We can.
It was automatic. So anyway, whoever wants to answer it, but when you talk about buying capacity, you know, that's one thing when we talk to people that may have self-generation or something, they just see the kilowatt hour price. What's the most concise way you can describe exactly what you're buying if you go out and buy capacity on the market, or exactly what you're selling, for instance, moving capacity west to east? What exactly are you selling when you define the capacity?
I guess I can hit this one. Capacity is the right to a generating asset that it can be called on in the event it is needed. It doesn't mean the actual production of the electricity. It's just having the right to call on it, that there is facilities on the ground that are there, that are meeting whatever requirements have to be, that could be dispatched if the market called on it. And so all utilities have to have adequate capacity, the ability to call on resources to meet your peak load plus a reserve margin.
Okay.
Plus, I think, Becky, you also need, from a capacity basis, to meet your obligation, you also need to have firm transmission to go from wherever that resource is to your load. So as an example, we couldn't go out and buy capacity in Texas with an expectation that it's going to keep central Montana's lights on in the middle of the wintertime. There has to be a firm, dedicated transmission path from that resource to your load. And that's going to get to be a bigger and bigger challenge as the transmission system gets loaded.
Thank you. Deanne?
I have a two-part question relating to batteries. First of all, does Basin have a plan for how they're going to handle member systems approaching them to utilize batteries? And second, assuming at some point that batteries become affordable to buy and dispose of, does Basin have a long-term strategic plan where they feel batteries could help the Basin system overall in bringing down wholesale power cost?
Do you have a plan on dealing with batteries, I think?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to hear up here. There's a bit of an echo, but I think what I heard the question is, what's our plan for batteries? We've got a meeting set up with the Class A district managers for next week. And one of the things we have been talking about, what's that plan for batteries for about the last year. We do need to come up with a formal plan. A couple of the concepts are, you know, we could let the members put batteries in. I think it would be economical for them to do that. They could incorporate it into their load management system. And through that, that member that put in the battery, they would get about a $20 a kilowatt month benefit from that battery. And that's kind of where the problem comes out. It gets to be a cost shift amongst the members. Our $20 demand charge is higher, isn't the right economic signal. So I think what we'd like to visit with the Class A district managers is, can we come up with a rate possibly that Basin could purchase or pay you for that battery capability? And under that scenario, it would eliminate some of the cost shifts, and it would become a very valuable resource because if we can bring batteries to bear at about where the price of capacity is in the market, that would be a good thing. It gets those generators or batteries out on the distribution system. They could possibly provide value there. But again, it would also provide resources to serve the whole membership and bring overall value to the whole group. So that's what we're trying to develop.
Chris?
I think maybe this question is for Dave or whoever can answer it, but Chris Larson, General Manager, Clay Union Electric, Vermilion, South Dakota, very small cooperative. We rely on economic development, and so I have to thank the board and staff for the economic development rate that is going to be available to us next year. But my question is, Dave, can you talk about, we know what the benefit's going to be to the local distribution co-op, but can you talk about what the benefit of gaining those loads are to Basin? Thus, what benefit is there to a co-op in Minnesota for Clay Union Electric getting additional load in Vermilion, South Dakota?
Sure. So the question, as I heard it, is what's the value of our load incentive rate today? And that rate does have a discounted demand charge that basically covers the cost of transmission, and it covers the cost of the capacity that we would need to buy it in the market. So during this initial period out through 2022, we would basically be, we're not subsidizing the rate below what our cost is to serve it. We can go out, we can buy the capacity in the market, we can get the transmission, and we can allow that local distribution co-op to get that load. We still sell the energy at our standard energy rate. The key is once that load gets located in that distribution co-op service territory, it will likely last long beyond the year 2022. And that's where Basin's revenue stream starts to increase, because our average rate is higher than what the market is. So we're avoiding some margin or giving up some margin in the early years for that long-term stable customer in the service territory. Now, from that local distribution co-op's perspective, it also brings more load into their area, and they can make a bit of a margin. There are some provisions in that rate schedule on how much they can mark up their rate, or the rate from the Basin and the G&T, so that we're all participating in taking a reduced margin through 2022. So I think it's designed so that it is beneficial for all the membership without any cross-subsidization.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to finish up with a question, but start out with, first, I can tell you that the answers they're giving you are very understated. They go through a lot of work to make that load balance every day. They're doing long-term markets, balancing the generation resources, purchases, you do the day-ahead markets, the real-time markets, you have to have the transmission set up. They're doing a lot more than what you're hearing, and they're doing a tremendous job. But how do you look forward in the future to make sure that expertise is there, so you're building that amongst your subordinates, and that Basin's well-positioned going forward? So how do we set the Basin up for success in the future and share that expertise?
So that's particularly relevant after a reduction in force. And so the immediate answer is we're making sure that the younger engineers, staff, get to training events. Basin Electric's done a real good job on the education, online education. There's a lot of materials available. SPP has a learning management system so that online You don't have to travel anywhere. You can get a lot of good educational materials with that. So that's one part that we're focusing on, particularly with the younger staff.
I think you're right, Tom. You know, a lot of the things that we do, we can post a job and find applicants, but it's very rare that we're going to find someone in Bismarck, North Dakota that has the qualifications and skill sets or has done some of the things that we do in marketing and resource planning. So it's really important when we hire staff to hire very capable staff that are willing to extend themselves and to learn new things and to come to work with a really good attitude every day. And I can say we have a lot of great staff in our group that does the work that they do. Most of the people in our group that we have hired haven't done this kind of work before, and they've taken it on and they've learned it, and they've done a great job over the last 5 years as we've gotten into the market. I'm really fortunate to have a great team to work with. So that's very it's very fun to come to work every day and do what we do. Training, continual training, like you said, Tom, is really important as well. And then I think finally, to develop metrics within your team to make sure people are seeing what the targets are, and so they can measure and benchmark and say, yeah, we're hitting it, we're doing it, and we're doing a good job, or there's room for us to improve when we can measure what we're doing and try to be better every day.
Thank you.
I guess I'd add, in my area within long-term planning, load forecasting, and rate development, trying to give opportunities for different staff to try different things, working on various projects together, trying to allow just different opportunities, people to try things out, work in different areas, get exposed to different pieces, so that if someone's gone on maternity leave or paternity leave, they're gone a week on vacation, you know, there's always somebody else that knows, you know, where the information is, they know who to contact, they know kind of generally what to do, and everyone kind of works together and really tries to help each other out when one area is starting to get pushed up against a brick wall or whatever you want to call it, and try to help each other out to meet all of our obligations. And within my group, everyone, I got to echo Val here, you know, everyone works well together, and really appreciate the team that I have back at the office that works on all of this together.
I think I really need to emphasize the ability of people to work together. I'm extremely supportive and happy that Basin Electric has gone more to a cubicle-style office environment. I've been a big supporter of that for many years because it really lets groups of people hear what's going on. It helps that educational process on how they learn. I think it also gives people the ability, if I don't know, I can just ask so-and-so sitting right here, and maybe he can help me out a little bit. Because I'm a real strong supporter of younger staff. I think it's really good. I think other things is give your staff the opportunity to make decisions, to be active in the decision process. I think is so key, so that as they develop, they get comfortable with making those hard decisions when they don't know all the facts. That gets to be just a huge challenge for a lot of people. Some people just think everything is black and white, and boy, it sure isn't. So I think just it really gets back to camaraderie, building the devoted staff, and continue to educate and emphasize, do you know why you're doing this?
Well, I want to thank you all. On behalf of the membership, we're very fortunate to have this body of expertise. If you try to recreate that on your own, it's very, very difficult. So just appreciate the work you do on behalf of the membership, and just thanks a lot for everything you do every day. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks, Dave. Nice job.